break that energy. So this is week 4 of our unfolding series on the benefits of living truth principles. So far, we've covered 1, unity's inherently practical approach to spirituality in general, and in Christianity in particular. Specifically, Fillmore's original intention to identify and share the truth that Jesus promised would set us free, noting that Fillmore interpreted this as aligned with perennial wisdoms and truth that includes and it integrates all wisdom sources, including science, thus the name he came up with, unity, as well as to determine the way we are to follow, in essence, how we are to actually live, the practical ways that we can apply these principles and embody this truth in our everyday habits and choices, such that we increasingly experience the freedom of God's realm, the kingdom of God within us and among us. And finally, to provide a multidisciplinary and integrated, ever-evolving path for spiritual discovery, exploration, deepening, healing, skill building, and practice that is at once eclectic and also unified and supports our spiritual growth. I want to emphasize the word evolving there. Fillmore, as we remind you often, reserved the right to change his mind because he knew his own understanding would evolve and he expected unity to continue to grow beyond him. Unlike Christian Science, where Mary Baker Eddy wrote the Christian Science book, and that is the book they are still using today without change. And some traditions attempting to, they say, originally, read the Bible as its original words. It sounds like when we talk about reading the Constitution with its original intention. Words are words, and they can only be interpreted the way we interpret them from our own perspective. So Fillmore was totally aware of that and expected us all to continue to grow, including his unity movement. The second benefit we looked at is how the freedom of knowing the truth and the realization of God's realm actually feels and looks like in our everyday living. And I shared from my perspective, and I invited you all to actually think about what would that feel like and look like if you had created heaven on earth for yourself. And it's a powerful exercise. But I talked about it including an evolving and cumulative process of understanding and demonstrating our true identity as spiritual beings. In essence, I would experience continuing to grow into my spiritual awareness, wherein my practice that's reinforced by positive results shifts my default setting so that I live more aligned with the way as identified by Jesus and interpreted by Fillmore, rather than by my ego limitations and definitions and fears. The result being that we would increasingly live from our spiritual grounding with occasional ego disruptions, rather than, as most of us live now, from continual ego disruptions with moments of peace and prayer. I really like to see that flip. I can watch over the 30 plus years I've been doing that the ratios have been shifting so that I'm more in peace than I am in disruption today than I was 30 years ago, and that's the goal. And all of that creates the tangible results of greater physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual health, of greater meaning, purpose, and fulfillment in my life, which is what I call prosperity, and also of greater awareness of oneness and peace, which is greater spiritual grounding. Last week, we focused specifically on how Unity's teachings about the discipline of right thinking contribute to these positive, immediate, and relevant results that are associated with living the truth. Right thinking being the conscious understanding and application of our third unity basic principle, the law of mind action, meaning we create our reality through thoughts held in mind, in essence, from the inside out, meaning that life happens through us, not to us. First, we talked about that thinking is what gives people the capacity to hear the unity message and respond with, now this makes sense to me. See, it's a mind thing. No checking my brain at the door. God being pure love, not angry and love and weird combination. No original sin. In fact, we're evolving spiritual beings having a human adventure. There are many paths to God rather than exclusive paths. Yes, tell me more. How many of you remember having those feelings when you walked in? It was this like, I can tell me more about this. This is making sense to me. So it's about our thinking capacity. Second, thinking underlies and supports the understanding and application of Unity's other spiritual disciplines, including faith, prayer, meditation, and practical application, even as it initiates or quickens ever-increasing self-awareness, including revealing and healing our early error programming. And in doing that, as we heal our past, we're able to expand our capacity to exercise free will today, because we're not necessarily as strictly programmed by all of our old beliefs, and then are able to consciously co-create our own reality, grounded in love rather than fear and those toxic beliefs that we brought from childhood. Additionally, it offers multiple positive thought practices and disciplines like regular spiritual practice, gratitude, forgiveness, always looking for the blessings or lessons, affirmative prayer, denials and affirmations, all of these practical tools that can have an immediate effect on our lives in very positive ways. Third, thinking is at the core of Unity as a teaching movement that encourages deepening our spiritual walk through ongoing spiritual study and growth. It isn't about that you get it and live from there. It's about that we always are expanding. Every time I go through these 5 basic principles, I bring a deeper, broader, different understanding, because it's addressing where I'm living from in that moment. And that's one of the things I love about these principles, is they're as expansive as they can be, always inviting us to grow. Fourth, thinking is essential to the active development of our faith-thinking faculty, which Fillmore identifies as the most important power of humanity, awakening our capacity for original, in essence new, versus second-hand intuitive insights and understanding that result in our ongoing evolution and consciousness. Faith thinking, according to Fillmore, is the process of going within, tapping directly into divine mind, and thereby giving form to ideas that come straight from the eternal fount of wisdom, instilling a deep sense of knowing. It's sort of like what Buckminster Fuller did with his geodesic dome. And it mirrors Einstein, who said, "I believe in intuition and inspiration. All great achievements of science must start from intuitive knowledge." So there's this belief in this, that there is this knowledge, there's this structure, principle that the universe is based on, and we can tap into that if we can go within. And that, as I promised last week, takes us into yet another realm of Unity's teachings that brings us direct and multiple benefits. Our fourth Unity principle, I pray, which is opening to and aligning our heart minds with God and truth. I'll always remember a comment made by a church growth consultant years ago. I was at this workshop. He wasn't specifically a Unity consultant, but he was very familiar with our Unity teachings. He said, "Unity has a major advantage over some of the more traditional churches in that your movement still teaches and actually believes in the power of prayer." Think about that. Of course, his comment reflected the fact that our Unity understanding and practice of prayer is different from the more traditional Judeo-Christian approach that involved pleading with a God out there to intervene on our behalf. And might I say, it also involved expecting God to accept our idea of what would be our highest good, rather than, which, you know where that gets us. I mean, you can have the saying, be careful what you pray for. Because, so it's a very distinct kind of thing. Like, we want God to have our side win. We want God to have, and I remember teaching my sons that they could not pray for God to be on their team's side. That God could only support all of them in playing the best that they were capable of playing. So it's sort of a whole different approach. As I say near the end of every service, when I remind people that we have chaplains available to pray with them, I always say, in Unity, we understand that prayer doesn't change God. In other words, we don't pray to God, a God out there to fix things for us, whether it's personally or collectively. Whether it's believing our nation is blessed more than other nations, or whether we should be blessed more than others, or just that we should have something fixed the way we think it ought to be fixed. That also means, however, that we don't have to struggle with explaining the unexplainable. In essence, why God would answer some prayers but not others. Nor do we ask, where is God in the midst of tragedies, natural or human caused? Because we don't understand God as being out there and capriciously responding to some prayers and not to others, or rewarding or punishing humans according to some code known only by God, which sort of takes us back to that capricious approach. Rather, in unity, we believe in a mystical tradition, which is defined by Charles Fillmore as practicing the presence of God through prayer that results in intuitive knowledge and experience of God. And we believe, of course, that we each are mystics, that we're all potential mystics. It's all about learning and practicing how to make that connection. Fillmore describes prayer as communion with God that takes place in the innermost parts of our being, in essence, in our consciousness. We could also substitute the word God for communion with oneness, communion with divine love, communion with truth. In other words, unity's understanding and practice of prayer, which includes, of course, meditation. If you look at the Unity five-step prayer process, meditation is a part of that. It allows us to experience the presence that is the ground of our own being. It removes all barriers and boundaries of separation and enables us to directly, intuitively know God, rather than just believe in something based on teachings that we've gotten through our religion, and that then in crisis we question and challenge. Fillmore further explains, prayer is the most highly accelerated mind action known. It steps up mental action until our human consciousness synchronizes with the Christ mind. Of course, that could be Buddha mind or higher mind or divine mind. And he goes on, it is the language of spirituality. Prayer is an affirmation of truth that eternally exists, but which has not yet come into consciousness. He then advises, get still and think about the inexhaustible resources of infinite mind, its presence in all its fullness, and its constant readiness to manifest itself when its laws are complied with. This is what Jesus meant when he said, seek first God's kingdom and God's righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. So in the 90s, with the advancement of neurophysiology, science began exploring the intersection between the brain and religious and spiritual experiences, naming this new field of research neurotheology, and asking questions like, is spiritual experience real or delusional? What happens when we pray and meditate? Does prayer and meditation affect or improve the human condition? In essence, does it really impact healing and other quality of life factors? Neuroscientist and MD Andrew Newberg, along with a number of other researchers, conducted studies, including the use of functional brain imaging, to study Buddhist meditators, Franciscan nuns in prayer, and chanting Sikhs, among others. His work was eventually published in 3 books, The Mystical Mind, Why God Won't Go Away, and Why We Believe What We Believe. Titles tell you a lot in themselves. The research discovered that intensely focused spiritual contemplation triggers an alteration in the activity of the brain that leads one to perceive transcendent religious experiences as solid, tangible reality. In other words, a sensation that the Buddhists call oneness with the universe. Newberg explains, because this orientation area of the brain requires sensory input to do its calculus, if you block sensory input into this region, as you do during the intense concentration of meditation, you prevent the brain from forming the distinction between self and not self. In essence, with no information from the senses arriving, the left orientation area cannot find any boundary between the self and the world. As a result, the brain seems to have no choice but to perceive the self as endless and intimately interwoven with everyone and everything. I like that, seems to have no choice. Similarly, the right orientation area of the brain, equally bereft of sensory data, defaults to a feeling of infinite space. The meditators feel that they have touched infinity. Barbara Bradley Haggerty, an NPR investigative reporter and author of the book Fingerprints of God, spent a year exploring this science of spirituality, interviewing dozens of scientists and spiritual practitioners, including Newberg. This was her conclusion. She said, to date, spiritual science is much like a Rorschach test. You can look at the evidence and come to opposite conclusions. For example, the materialist says that a spiritual experience is just brain chemistry, or firings in the temporal lobe of the brain, while others look at the same evidence and conclude that we're wired to be able to connect with the divine, and brain chemistry is a reflection of that encounter. Bradley Haggerty also adds, in short, science cannot prove or disprove the existence of God, but science is entirely consistent with God experiences. Newberg actually agrees. He stated one could try to conclude one way or the other, that maybe it's the biology or maybe God's really in the room, but the scan itself doesn't really show that. For neurotheology to really work as a field, it needs to be very respectful and open to both perspectives, especially since multiple ongoing studies continually reveal that regardless of what one believes to be the source, the spiritual practices of prayer and meditation have multiple, tangible, quantifiable, and positive effects on the human condition, including, but not limited to, stress reduction. Just 15 minutes of prayer and meditation a day can make a huge difference in our lives by bringing peace and relaxation to our bodies and minds, and increasing our capacity to choose where we focus our attention and energy. In essence, are we going to focus on our worries, or are we going to focus on our blessings and finding peace? Number 2, prayer and meditation. Through prayer and meditation, we learn to welcome peace and tranquility into our minds, which then affects how we live our lives. This, in combination with alleviating the stresses in our lives, allows us to better concentrate on the things that are important, such as family, work, or other creative endeavors. We don't just get all cut up in our monkey mind. We get to choose where we're going to put our attention. Number 3, which is related, prayer and meditation helps us develop better control over our thoughts. Learning to focus our attention during prayer and meditation also increases our capacity to become mindful about thinking throughout the day. For example, limiting our negative fear-based thinking, limiting our monkey mind chatter, limiting judgments and other reactions, and consciously replacing them with creative problem-solving, thoughts of gratitude, life insights, and inspirations to do and be goodness in the world. How many of you, the longer you've been in Unity, find yourself more able to catch yourself when you start going down a spiral negative path? And you become, oh wait, I don't want to go there, I'm going to go read my daily word, or I'm going to use an affirmation. That's having meta-awareness. That's us catching our monkey mind in action and stopping it. That's us being able to make choices. Number 4, prayer and meditation actually results in better relationships. Through mindfulness, we also learn to pause before reacting, which allows us to choose our responses and avoid emotional outbursts, which enable us to engage in more mindful communication and thus healthier relationships. All of the studies show communication is a huge part of the quality of relationships. The more you're able to communicate well and peacefully and respectfully, the better your relationships will be. Additionally, studies have shown that praying for others, including things like compassion meditations, have been shown to improve self-control, reducing our mental exhaustion, and when we reduce our mental exhaustion, again, we're more able to choose. It also makes us nicer, with less aggressive anger. They have studies that show that when people have prayed for other people, then later when they're triggered by something that would normally make them angry, their response is not as intense and it doesn't go to as much aggression. And the two things don't even have to be related. Prayer and meditation makes us more forgiving also. When someone prays, it opens the door to forgiveness. And as we forgive, what we know is it releases us from the bondage of our own past. As we often say, not forgiving is like drinking poison, expecting the other person to die. So as we learn to forgive more, it frees us up to be able to be at choice. It also increases trust by expanding our capacity for understanding and acceptance. All of these things obviously supporting healthier and more compassionate relationships. And finally, prayer and meditation improve health and happiness in general, reducing stress, prioritizing where we focus our thoughts and energy, increasing our capacities for more reflection and mindful choices, and improving our communication capacities, enabling more kindness, forgiveness, and trust, all result in healthier relationships, and they all lead to improved physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual health, which in turn creates an ever-increasing capacity for happiness and fulfillment. In fact, so many studies have demonstrated the power of prayer influencing our healing and life expectancy that it's become part of medical school curriculums. And it's got its own title, if I can say this, psychoneuroimmunology. Psychoneuroimmunology. And it's become an everyday thing. I mean, hospitals create chaplaincy departments now not just because they want to have a good support system, but they know it actually helps people heal. People that are prayed for heal, get out of the hospital sooner, and stay well longer, living past the projections of how long they had left to live. So it's been demonstrated in such a way they can't necessarily know what's causing it, but they see the results. In short, there are an amazing array of documented benefits around prayer and meditation, and it's a core teaching of unity. It's how unity started, was Myrtle Fillmore healing herself through a prayer practice. And there's still more good news. What the scientists have found out is regardless of the faith tradition, whether it was Buddhist monks meditating or Franciscan nuns praying or Sikhs chanting, it's all the same in our brains. In essence, many paths, one God, one truth. And the other good news is positive results don't require hours of daily practice or many years of practice. The key is just to begin. If you start meditating 1 minute in the morning and 1 minute at night, and you hadn't been meditating before, that's a 200% increase in your meditation time. Just begin. And trust me, most of you who have ever started meditating, if you just tell yourself, and you don't do it because you don't have time, so if you just say, so I'm going to do it for a minute or 2 minutes, what you'll find is you'll want to do it longer. It will no longer become a burden. It will become something that your heart and mind calls you to. Just 2 months of practice among rank amateurs has led to systematic changes in both the brain as well as the immune system in more positive directions. Studies demonstrate that. So let's all say, thank you, God.
Thank you, God.
So next week, we're going to be turning our focus to how unity teaching support and enhance emotional and spiritual maturity. So stay tuned.
that time during the service when we have an opportunity to practice some prayer and meditation. And Vicky mentioned the five-step unity process. Five-step unity prayer process. I'm going to take you through that process now. So the first step is relaxation. So whatever helps you relax, take some deep breaths. Get yourself situated in the pew. Place your feet on the floor if that's comfortable. Allow your shoulders to drop down away from your ears. Place your hands gently on your lap in a comfortable, easy, and effortless position. The next step is concentration. One way that we can do this is by using very simple mantras. So as you're breathing, you can breathe in, God is here. And breathe out, I am home. Breathe in, God is here. Breathe out, I am home. Breathe in, God is here. Breathe out, I am home. Just continue to breathe slowly and deeply. You can say the words in your head as you breathe in, God is here. And breathe out, I am home. The next step is meditation. This is when we spend some time in the quiet. Allowing thoughts that come to your mind to just drift on by like clouds in the sky. The purpose is not to stop our thoughts. The mind is constantly generating thoughts. It's just what it does. But when we realize that we have lost our concentration on our breathing or on the mantra, is a chance to just gently bring ourselves back. So no berating ourselves, no feeling like I'm not doing it right. Just saying, oh, there's the mind. Oh, there's another thought. You can just bless it and gently release it. And come back to your breath. Breathing in, God is here. Breathing out, I am home. You can do this as many times as you need. Just keep coming back to that home base, that anchor, the breath. Simply breathing in and breathing out. The next step is realization. This is when we begin to get those fleeting glimpses that we are not this human self. We are much more. As we release thoughts and ego distractions, we might just catch a fleeting glimpse of who we are without all of that. We might begin to feel a presence very close in with us. That presence of love and peace that we call God. without all of my thoughts, without all of my doing and my activity, who am I? I am this one, sitting here, breathing. The final step is appreciation. Sometimes at this point, it just wells up inside of us. We don't even have to think. We are grateful. Grateful for having allowed our bodies and minds to rest, even for a short time. Grateful for that loving presence that's always near. Grateful for this body breathing.